The lights inside the global TV studio were blinding. Massive LED walls shifted between CNN, BBC, and Al Jazeera logos. It was supposed to be a unity dialogue, a high-level conversation between U.S. senators and African leaders. The world was watching. Live. Captain Ibrahim Traoré sat calmly under the studio lights, dressed sharply in a dark blue suit. He hadn't spoken much, just listened. Elizabeth Warren had just finished speaking about democratic values in Africa. That's when he moved. Without a word, Traoré reached into the leather case beside him. Every eye followed. He pulled out a thick black folder, plain and unmarked. Slowly, he turned to the host and said just 6 words. "I believe the world deserves truth." Then he raised his hand toward the control room behind the glass. Suddenly, audio began to play through the studio speakers. It was a voice, clear, familiar. "Warren, I don't care what happens there. Let them starve. It's not our priority." Gasps erupted. A few people stood up. Cameras zoomed in. Reporters dropped their pens. Elizabeth Warren's face froze, and then slowly, her mouth began to tremble. The host's hand covered his mouth in shock. Elizabeth Warren turned sharply toward the booth. "Cut the audio! Cut it now!" she shouted. But it was too late. The second clip had begun. Warren's voice again. This time, laughing, "Let them keep shouting about sovereignty. When the money dries up, they'll come crawling back." Captain Traoré didn't flinch. He sat quietly, his hands folded. No anger, no outburst, just truth. Elizabeth Warren slammed her hand on the table. "You manipulated these tapes." The host leaned forward, whispering, "Senator, this is your voice. Multiple timestamps, real dates. This is verified." Her face turned pale, then flushed bright red, and then she screamed, "You think you can humiliate me?" She stood up so fast her chair slammed backward. Security guards moved subtly toward the stage. But the world wasn't looking at him. They were watching Warren unravel. In Paris, Nairobi, Johannesburg, people were glued to their screens. On Twitter, hashtags exploded. Warren exposed. Traoré, truth, justice for Africa. And yet, it had only just begun. Silence fell. Only the whir of camera cranes and Warren's heavy breathing echoed through the studio. Then, without warning, the third tape began. A younger African voice, scared, soft. "Senator, my village has no food. We've lost 3 children this week." Then Warren's recorded response. "That's not my jurisdiction." Next question. The studio cracked. You could hear someone sob. A young journalist from Kenya, just behind the cameras, dropped her notepad. Her hands covered her face. She was crying, not from rage, but grief. Captain Traoré leaned forward, finally, and spoke. "This is not about revenge. This is about dignity. Dignity is not negotiable." The audience clapped slowly, hesitantly, then louder. Many stood, but Warren wasn't done. Her eyes were bloodshot. She pointed at Traoré. "Who gave you these tapes? Who set this up?" Traoré calmly replied. "Your conscience set this up. I'm just the voice you've ignored." The lights dimmed. The next tape was darker. Something unreleased, and Traoré, for the first time, closed his eyes. Because what came next would shake the very core of the American Senate, and none of them were ready. The fourth audio clip echoed like thunder. Warren's voice again, calm, cold, calculated. "If they keep fighting over minerals, we don't have to negotiate. Just let them burn themselves out." A woman in the audience gasped. A cameraman dropped his headset. Captain Ibrahim Traoré didn't blink. He was still. His silence said more than any speech could. Elizabeth Warren was pacing now, trying to breathe. Her voice cracked. "Those tapes are manipulated. This is foreign propaganda." But the studio wasn't buying it. In the back, a South Sudan war widow clutched her press badge. Her son had died for a mine that funded another man's greed. She whispered, "He knew. He really knew." Traoré finally stood. "Africa does not seek revenge, but silence has lasted too long. Our dead deserve more than memories." The camera zoomed in on Warren's trembling hands. Outside the studio, protesters had already started gathering. Screens all over Times Square were replaying the moment. And inside one small control booth, a technician stared at an unopened folder labeled Unclassified Funding Trails 201-72023. It hadn't been played yet, but it would. The fifth tape was quiet at first, just background chatter. Then Elizabeth's voice again. Use her. She's hungry for fame. She'll say anything we script. Who? The host whispered. The tape answered for him. Zavati, from Uganda. She's desperate. The girl who had once cried on live TV, begging for clean water and education, millions had believed in her. Now the world realized she was used. Traoré bowed his head, his hands gripped tightly. Suddenly, a video played. It showed Zavati 2 years ago speaking at the UN General Assembly. The same words, now hollow. In the studio, Warren's face collapsed. She whispered, "No, no." This was never supposed to be heard, but it was. Zavati herself was watching from a safe house in Nairobi. Tears fell from her eyes. "I didn't know," she cried into the camera on her phone. "I didn't know that video would go viral in 6 minutes." And Traoré, he stood like stone because what came next involved American aid money and a deadly famine no one had spoken about until now. The studio lights flickered briefly. Tape 6 began. A young aid worker's voice trembled through the speakers. "We had enough food to stop the famine, but the container ships were told to hold at port. Orders came from Washington." Then Warren's voice cut in sharply. "Release it after midterms. We need a bigger story." A Chang's photo flashed on screen, skinny eyes sunken, holding a bowl of rice. A single bowl. The room fell apart. One of the studio producers broke into tears behind the stage curtain. The host removed his earpiece and just stared at Warren. She looked like she had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Captain Trout's voice was low but full of pain. "That child's name was Issa. I met his mother. She thought we failed her, but now she will know who really did." On social media, people were crying openly. Hashtag surged. Root justice for Issa. Let Africa breathe. Traoré truth. At that moment, a new message popped up on the screen. Breaking: U.S. Senate announces emergency press briefing inside the control booth. A final folder was slid across the table. Top secret. Project Dusk. And that was the one that could end careers forever. The lights in the studio dimmed again. Tape 7 clicked on. This one was different. Not audio, but a recorded Zoom call. Warren sat at a desk flanked by 2 lobbyists. On the screen, maps of Africa appeared, color-coded by mineral value. One man said, "If we destabilize regions B and C, we delay their development plans. That buys us time." Warren replied calmly, "Do it quietly. Use debt pressure, no headlines." Captain Traoré stared at the screen, not in anger, but heartbreak. "This was never about help," he whispered. "It was about control." The room was silent. A mother in the front row of the audience clutched her daughter. She had fled Congo 3 years ago after a militia wiped out her village, the same one circled on that map. Warren stood frozen. "You're taking this out of context," she murmured. But no one believed her anymore. In Accra, Banjul, and Lusaka, people cried watching their lands treated like chessboards. And in the control booth, a silent video file titled Zawadi Confession blinked on screen. It hadn't aired yet, but when it would, millions would cry. Tape 8 was a phone video, shaky, raw. Zavati appeared on screen. No makeup, no lights, just pain in her eyes. She spoke slowly, her voice cracking. "They promised to pay for my mom's surgery if I gave a speech," they wrote. "I didn't understand it fully. I was 17, but now I know." She held up a photo of her mother in a hospital bed, a woman who later died waiting for help that never came. "Captain True, I failed my people. But you didn't. Thank you for standing for the truth." The camera cut to the live studio. No one knew he'd flown from Nairobi to attend the broadcast. He never thought the world would finally listen. Captain True stood again, this time visibly moved. "Truth is painful. The guilty are those who exploited you." The studio erupted in applause, not in celebration, but in grief. Even some American guests lowered their eyes, because when the next tape rolled, it wouldn't just be words. It would be children's graves. The 9th tape was unlike anything before it. A documentary clip, no narration, no music, just raw footage. Dozens of small graves, each marked by wooden crosses. A local priest in Burkina Faso explained quietly, "These were the children who starved when the promised aid never came." Then, one by one, the camera panned over their names. Ahamusa Adama Nafisatu children. The studio was silent. Reporters had tears in their eyes. Warren looked away. Her hands shook uncontrollably. She muttered something, but her microphone was, "We plant trees for the living, but we bury dreams for the dead." A photo appeared on the LED screen. A boy holding a drawing. It was of a school. That boy never got to go. Twitter was overwhelmed. Africa remembers Traoré speaks for us. Never again. And then the screen turned black. A line of white text appeared. Next file. Whistleblower letter confirmed. In that envelope was the name of a U.S. official who had tried to stop it all, but they were silenced, and their letter would be next. The camera zoomed in as the control room cued the next file. A soft female voice began to read aloud. Not Traoré's, not Warren, a voice from the shadows. "If this letter is being read, I've likely been fired or silenced." The audience froze. The letter, dated February 2023, was written by Alyssa Monroe, a senior ethics officer at the U.S. Foreign Aid Office. She detailed meetings in which high-ranking officials, including Senator Warren, discussed delaying food shipments to manipulate African elections. "When I questioned the orders," the letter continued, "I was told to stay in my lane or risk losing everything." A photo of Alyssa appeared on screen. She was smiling, holding a child in a clinic in Sierra Leone. Tro's voice cracked for the first time. She tried to stop it alone. Warren looked stunned as if hearing the name for the first time. But someone else in the studio stood up. It was a young man, readied, angry. "That's my sister," he said. "She died in a car crash 3 months ago. They called it accidental." The entire room gasped. The next file, dashcam footage. The dashcam video began playing. It was blurry, filmed at night. Rain pounded the windshield. A car moved cautiously along a Washington highway. Suddenly, headlights from behind, swerving, speed increasing. Then the crash. The camera went black. Then a timestamp appeared. March 12, 2025, 9:41 p.m. the same night, Alyssa Monroe's body was found, the host whispered. "She was leaving a meeting that day, wasn't she?" Tro nodded. Warren didn't speak. She just stared at the screen, biting her lip. A close-up showed the last text sent from Alyssa's phone before the crash. "Captain Traoré is the only one who will understand. I'm sending the files to his office now." That's how the folder came to be in his hands. The audience sat in still silence. Traoré took a breath and said, "This is not about revenge. It is about Alyssa Zawadi, Issa, and millions whose voices were stolen, buried, erased. I am only returning them." From South Africa to Haiti, live stream comments poured in. "I can't stop crying. How did we not know this? Protect Ibrahim at all costs." But it wasn't over yet. The final 3 files were labeled Warren, personal admissions, no music, no dramatic lighting, just a shaky recording of Elizabeth Warren sitting alone at her desk in a Senate office, unaware her webcam was still recording. She was on a private call, talking freely. Sometimes you have to make hard decisions. If a few suffered to protect American interest, so be it, the host whispered. This was never meant to be seen. Then Warren laughed on the video. A cold, tired laugh, trial, raised to clean. "That man is a storm. I can't read. I hope someone finds his weakness." Back in the studio, Ibrahim didn't react. He just looked at her with something almost like pity. "You never looked for my weakness," he said gently. "You overlooked my strength, my people." For the first time, Warren had no words. The studio was dead silent. Then something happened no one expected. Warren stood up, walked to the edge of the stage, and apologized. But it was too late, because the final tapes would reveal something even she didn't know had been recorded. A secret deal, a signature, and the truth that could bring an entire system crashing down. The control room hesitated. "Are you sure you want to show this?" "One," a producer asked. Captain Trout nodded. The studio lights dimmed. A digital scan of a contract appeared on the LED wall. A hush swept over the audience. At the top, bold red letters, Confidential Private Resource Access Agreement, 2023. Beneath it, the official U.S. seal and a signature, Elizabeth Warren. The agreement handed over mining rights in West Africa to a private American company just weeks after Traoré had nationalized Burkina Faso's mines for his people. "This was signed without our consent," Traoré said. Then the video played, a hidden camera showing Warren saying, "If Traoré won't cooperate, we'll work around him." The room erupted in murmurs. Phones lit up. One journalist began crying softly. She had covered the mine protests in Burkina Faso. She saw those who died. "They called them rebels," she whispered, "but they were farmers just trying to survive." Warren buried her face in her hands. And Traoré, he stepped forward and said, "You didn't just steal gold, you stole graves." The silence was suffocating. But the next video would come from inside Burkina Faso itself. Tape 14 was simple. No production, no graphics, just a black screen and the sound of children. One by one, they spoke into the camera. "My name is Hale Lima. My father worked at the mine. He never came home. I'm Musa. I heard the gunshots. I hid under the water bucket. I'm Kadariatu. My mom says our land is gone." The white man put a fence. The screen faded into a video of bulldozers rolling through a village. Houses flattened. A woman screamed, chasing soldiers with nothing but a wooden spoon. The studio was stunned. People were sobbing openly now. Even the makeup artist had dropped to her knees backstage, holding her face in her palms. Traoré took a long breath, visibly holding back tears. "We are not victims. We are not helpless, but we are tired. Tired of bleeding for profits." Then something unexpected happened. Warren stood, shaking pale. She whispered into the microphone, "I didn't know. I thought it was just policy." But the camera didn't linger on her. It turned to a girl in the crowd. She wore a torn white dress. She was Halima, and she had something to say. Halima stood slowly, clutching a photo in her hand. The studio went completely still. She walked toward the stage, gently held out the picture, and whispered, "This was my father. He died the day after they came to take our land." Her voice shook. He said, "One day the world will hear us." But no one listened, until today. Captain Traoré knelt to meet her eye to eye. "I hear you. I always will." The camera zoomed in on Halima's face, eyes full of sadness, yet burning with strength. She wasn't crying, not anymore. She looked at Warren. "You called us numbers, but we have names. We are people." The audience broke down. Tears, sobs, hands over hearts. Even in Times Square, where the interview was being broadcast, people stopped walking. Strangers stood shoulder to shoulder, watching, crying together. Traoré stood again. "We do not want pity. We want justice. We want dignity. And we want our truth to never be silenced again." A new hashtag trended worldwide in seconds. Hale Lima has spoken. The final chapter was near. The screen flashed. Final file. U.S. Internal Memo. Emergency Africa Directive. The screen lit up with a glowing white document, internal use only. Emergency Africa Strategy. Confidential, dated just 6 months prior. It was written by senior U.S. policy advisors. The language was blunt, not dressed up in diplomacy. If resistance from African leaders like Traoré continues, consider economic throttling via debt renegotiation, influence regional elections where necessary. Delay all independent resource control. The audience gasped again. This wasn't just about Burkina Faso, it was about all of Africa. Elizabeth Warren collapsed into her chair. Her face was blank. Not from guilt now, but from defeat. The system had spoken through her, and now it was bleeding through her silence. Traoré walked to the edge of the stage. "You called us unstable, but it was your greed that kept us that way." He looked into the camera. "Africa is not your battlefield. We are a home, we are a mother, and we are rising." In Nairobi, Kinshasa, Accra, Johannesburg, church bells rang. People flooded streets. Screens flashed, Africa rising, truth over power. Traoré, the voice. But one voice was still missing. Alyssa, Monroe's mother. And she had just entered the studio. Security opened the side door quietly. An older woman, draped in a faded navy shawl, entered the stage holding a sealed envelope. It was Alyssa Monroe's mother. Her hands trembled as she spoke. I never had the courage to say this, but when my daughter died, they told me she had swerved. I never believed him. She handed the letter to the host. It was dated 3 days before Alyssa's death. In it, she wrote, "If anything happens to me, know I stood for Africa." I watched children eat dust while adults signed billion-dollar contracts. I saw Captain Traoré try to protect his people when no one else would. If I don't make it, remember, me not with pity, but with action. Thank you for finishing her work. Traoré gently embraced her, a moment so real, so raw. The entire audience stood in silence. No claps, just tears. Even Warren stood quietly, head bowed, because truth had already won. But True wasn't done. He raised his hand for one final word, and the world leaned in. Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood, alone at the center of the stage, no screens, no files, just his voice. People will ask, why now? Why speak out? He paused, because children like Issa deserve more than silence. Because daughters like Zavati deserve truth. Because people like Alyssa should never have to die for doing the right thing. He looked into the camera again. To every African watching this, you are not forgotten. Your life matters. Your voice is powerful. And to the rest of the world, we do not hate you, but we will no longer beg for what is already ours. Dignity, justice, respect. The studio burst into applause, but not loud, not dramatic, soft, emotional, honest. Outside the studio, thousands had gathered, holding candles, chanting one name, Traoré, Traoré, Traoré. Even Elizabeth Warren, broken, humbled, walked up to him. I won't ask for forgiveness, but I will ask for help to change. He nodded once. Truth is the first step, dear viewer. If your heart was moved, if you felt even a drop of pain for Issa, for Alyssa, for Helima, please like this video. Subscribe to this channel for more TruthLink stories. Comment, I hear you.